tips on scoring a green inexperienced horse to a seasoned experienced horse. The start is what sets up the run. So the better start you get, the faster your time is going to be. The faster you're going to get to your position. The faster you're able to set up the run for your partner. So the start is a big part of team roping. And when you're late, that's going to affect your time. You're going to see that in your time, where you're not going to get to the steer as fast. If you end up breaking the barrier, now you're packing penalties. A 5 or a 10-second penalty for breaking out is going to affect your time. And so the start is a very big part of the run. And so this is where a lot of pressure can end up being in the start. And so that's where you see a lot of box issues for some horses. The box is where the pressure and the anxiety happen in the horse and the rider. And so this is where the horse knows everything's about to happen. Everything's going to happen. And so they start getting nervous. You can start feeling their heart rate. And then sometimes with riders too, you can start seeing where, the rider also knows now is that, okay, things are about to happen. You're anticipating that start. And so if both of you are kind of anxiety right there, then there's a good chance right there that you're going to break barriers. Your horse is going to start acting up. And so I always like to keep a horse and rider chart. So then that way you kind of understand what you're looking for as you're wanting to see where you're at in your riding and what horse is going to fit you. And so I always tell everybody, if your horse has high anxiety in the box and you ride with high anxiety, then the good chance right there that your horse is just going to be running around just like a ball bearing in a boxcar, just rattling around all over the place because you're not managing their emotions. Both of you are out of control with your emotions and your anxiety, and so it's just like kind of fueling the fire. And then you have some riders that almost ride half asleep. They're very calm. They don't have much energy. Well, if you're riding a 20 to 22-year-old horse, it's the same thing, doesn't have much anxiety, doesn't have much energy, has real low just run, things like that. Well, that usually creates you getting out late. You're going to get outrun because there's no energy to be able to get that horse ready for what's about to happen. And so I like to, if I ride with a lot of low energy, then sometimes that almost helps manage the horse with a little bit more anxiety. You kind of balance each other out. And then somebody who rides with a little bit more energy, a little bit higher anxiety, sometimes that almost wakes up an older horse to get more out of them. And so I kind of like keeping that chart a little bit. That way you kind of know what you're looking for and what your strengths are. Now you can develop those as you go. But when it comes down to a green horse or inexperienced horse, I highly recommend guys that are just getting started, that are green themselves, not going that route, because it takes a lot of experience to be able to manage a horse that's green or inexperienced. That's why you see so many guys that train horses and ride horses. They've done it for a long time. They know how to manage those horses. And so when I first got started riding horses, I remember we didn't have the four-wheelers and the Smarties and sleds that we have now. A lot of times back then when we started horses, almost everything came out of the box. And so when you wanted to season your horse, when you wanted to pattern your horse, you had to come out of the box. You had to have slower steers, and you had to be able to turn steers. That's how you kind of showed them how to turn the steers, how to frame, how to face. Well, then it seemed like once you got that horse finally good at all those things out there in the field, well, then what usually happened in the box? Well, you've made so many runs, and after a while, now all of a sudden you've finally got your horse seasoned in the field. Now you've got box issues. And so what I've learned starting colts is if I can manage everything else outside the arena before I even go in the box, my horse stays better in the box longer. So what do I mean by that? I'll rope the Smartie. I'll pattern that horse out there in the arena, show them where they're laying, show them where their position is. I'll do drills where they learn how to read the Smartie, where I let off. They learn how to rate. I'll log my horses and teach them properly with just logging my rope. And then I pin rope. And I'll turn some steers out there in the pen. And I'll go rope steers and get them where they know what they're doing before I even go to the box. Now, I would always let my horse relax in the box. So when I was done doing that, where I would uncinch my horse and step off was always in the box. What was I creating? I'm creating that safe space more or less for the horse, to where every time I ride in the box and I just let him rest and he gets his breath in there, that's the spot right there that he doesn't mind going to. And so that's how I'd start my colts. Well, then when I would start roping, they already have the stuff down in the field. They already know how to run in their position. They already know how to rate the steer. They already know how to log the horse or steer. They know how to face. And so now as I'm getting them in the box, now I can manage their emotions a little bit better. So if the more I'm seasoning them and raising their level, the more nervous they'll start to get a little bit in the box, I can manage that. I'm not always looking to train in the field as much as if I can feel them getting nervous, I'll manage, or I'll score, or I'll let them sit for a little bit longer. And so those are things that you learn to manage on a greener horse. And so where the pressure starts, this is where you'll start seeing things that can start getting created in a greener horse as the pressure starts to mount. They start looking away from the steer. They start wanting to kick their butt out. Some will start raring. They'll want out of the box. Why? Because of what the anxiety is. That when you sit in the box and you're about ready to go, that creates that anticipation of what's about to happen. And so you have to learn how to manage that. And so as I start going through those horses right there where I'll start trying to manage their stress level and their anxiety, what I'll start to do is when they start looking away, what I'll do is I'll just hold my reins. This is where you learn that the teach is in the release. This is one thing Chris Cox taught me. And so when I start going through things as my horses are green, to where eventually when they start wanting to look away, they're not want to look at the pressure, they want to look away from the pressure, I'll just hold them right there long enough until as soon as they get curious and as soon as they look between the reins, then I'll release. Then I'll pick back up. They'll probably look away from the pressure. Well, then as soon as they look back in between the reins again, then I'll release. So what that teaches them right there is to get some release instead of always picking up your reins, putting your rope under your arm, and going. And so that helps manage a little bit of when that horse wants to look away. What you'll start after a while, sometimes if you don't give a horse enough release, then after a while they're going to want to start kicking their butt out. And so anytime that they start kicking their butt out, you can do one or two things. You can either kind of admonish them and get after them for doing that and see if that doesn't help. But then sometimes the ones that get smarter and just want to fight, I won't fight with them. I'll just let them keep moving their butt whatever direction that they're wanting to go. So if they want to kick their butt to the right, then I might just keep their butt going. And then after a while, they'll be a little out of breath. Well, where am I going to let them relax? Right there in that corner. Well, then they can't stand the prosperity. They don't want to look away the pressure. And the pressure keeps mounting. They kick their butt out again. Well, I'll just kind of keep moving them around right there with the direction that they're wanting to go until eventually they want their air bad enough in that corner. And they're like, yeah, I'm good right here. But you've got to give them that release because you got to think what's in it for a head horse? Nothing. What's the only thing you can offer a head horse? Release. That's the one thing Chris Cox taught me. And that's helped me so much in the box as you're managing a green horse as they're going through that transition phase to be able to be an experienced horse. You'll go through a few of these instances. And so what eventually you'll start doing too is when you start going through scoring, you'll start going through a few phases. And so one of the biggest phases I see, especially at the World Series, is when the horse starts scoring the gates and not your hand. And so when I start going through those phases right there, what I mean by that is when the gates bang, the horse can either elevate, they can move their head away from your hand and give the reins back to your hand by basically overflexing. They can rear, they can pop, which that means is where they leave their front end leaves the ground. And sometimes they can just barely do it, where they call that popping, or sometimes they can do it a lot, and they call that rearing. And what happens right there is when they do that, then you don't get your start. Because when your horse is in the air, your start will get there, and you need to be going when they're not on the ground enough to where you can get going. Squatting. Sometimes the horse is right there, when they do that, they'll squat. Same thing. Well, then they leave elevated, and their feet aren't on the ground, and they're not getting the start that you want. And so here's how I'll manage those instances there. I'll score my horse after the gates bang. And what that does is once the gates bang and they jump at the gates and not your hand, I'll start walking them a little bit after the gates bang. And so if when I nod and they elevate, I'll walk them forward. And if when I nod and they squat, I'll walk them forward. What am I trying to do? I'm trying to get their feet back on the ground. I'm trying to get their mouth to where they're looking for my hand again. And what that'll do is it'll keep their feet a little bit more on the ground, and that's what they call flat. That's what you're wanting. You're wanting that horse to stay in your hand, and when you nod your head and see your start, when your left hand goes forward, them horses stay on the ground, and they're flat, and they're getting to the steer. If they elevate at all, that's when the steer's going to gain a stride on you, and your times are going to be affected by that. And so that's how I'll kind of manage right there when a horse wants to squat, elevate, or when they give the bit back to your hand. I'll score them going forward after the gates bang. Jackie, she has a really good saying that when she comes back from the end of the year breakawaying, is that she has to get back to scoring the calf and not the gates. And I see that a lot in your World Series where a guy will start anticipating that start too early, and then your horse will, and it kind of just magnifies from there. Now what happens when my horse starts running through my hand? So what that means is now when I nod my head, now that the horse is going to the gates, he's running through my hand. He's going when he wants to. Well, that's going to get you breaking barriers. That's going to get you to the 5-second, 10-second penalty. So anytime that when my horse starts going through my hand when I nod on the gates, I'm just going to back him back up nice and easy, let the horse relax there for a second, and then that's what I call a score, and I'm just going to score till he scores. And just keep it simple. And get him back up there in your hand again, nod, he goes to the gates, back him back up, let him sit right there, and then run a steer back up, score again. Just score until he scores. The reason why I'm not going to let him go out of the box, I'm just going to keep backing him up and letting him rest right there in the corner, is because I want him to understand, look, I want you to go off my hand, not the gates. So I want you to sit back here, back in the corner of this box until I tell you to go forward. So you're trying to be real obvious on what you're asking. Instead of going with the gates, now I want him to find my hand. I want him to be going off my left hand. So I just score until they score, and then eventually within 3 or 4 steers, then by the time the gates bang, they're going to be finding your hand and not jumping at the gates. Now, if they start kind of not figuring it out, then there's a time I might have to get on to them, maybe yank on them just a little bit, like, hey, pay attention right here. But what I don't want to do is if a horse just makes a mistake and then you get off and then you get after him with the bridle, that's what's going to make them start not trusting your hands. They're going to start elevating. They're going to start leaning back into you, and that's not what you want. So I want to make sure that if they make a mistake, I'm just going to let them make the mistake until they figure out, like, hey, trust my hand. That's what you're going to keep your horse confident right there in your left hand, to where then they're listening to your cues in your left hand. That's what I'm after. Now the cow fresh horse. This is like some of your cow bred horses, your cutters, things like that. Like when you get up there and they start shying away from the steer, maybe in the chute, or shying away from the steer when you get up there close to position. That's what they call cow fresh. Those are the ones I'll walk score. And what do I mean by that is when I'll back them up in the corner, I'll go ahead and walk them forward, and then I'll nod. So I'll nod with my horse almost close to the chute and almost close to the steer, to where in that way they have a chance to shy away from them, but then it's like it's okay. It's not going to hurt them. And then I'll just come back and do it again until eventually, once the gates bang, they quit shying away from the chute and the steer. So that you're kind of just desensitizing them, especially if they're fresh or if they haven't rode in a while, or if they're green and they get real cow fresh. So that's when I'll walk score. So now to your experienced type horses. These ones can get real smart. They call it rodeo smart. These are when the horses right here, a lot of times that when you deal with the ones that score really good at home, but maybe not score near as good as at the ropings or the rodeos. Well, when those happen, you want to make sure that you do everything the same. And what I had found is sometimes it's hard to try to score like you're going to rope. I always tell everyone, rope like you score and score like you rope. That way they don't know the difference. And so you want to make sure that, like, when you're scoring, know what all your mannerisms are in the box. Maybe you lean around, maybe you move around, or maybe you don't move a muscle. Whatever it is, try to do the same thing when you score. Because what I see a lot of times is when guys score is it looks like they're sitting in a lawn chair with their feet kicked back with an umbrella in their drink out there on the sand, relaxing. Well, then all of a sudden, okay, now we're going to rope. Well, now it looks like they're on the SWAT team about ready to go through a door. They can feel that energy. They know the difference. So make sure that you're scoring the same way you rope. That way they don't know the difference. Another thing that when they get experienced horse can do that they get real smart about is they'll know when the heeler leaves and when they don't. They'll watch the heel horse. They'll start watching that heel horse. When he goes, they go. When the heeler doesn't go, then they don't move a muscle. So like rodeo horses, I'll make sure when I score, the heeler leaves as well. That way nothing changes. They're paying attention to your hand because they get smart. Now rodeo types horses that I'll score or like upper level open horses, those are the ones that I'll make sure I want to see a pretty good start. I might run a little bit slower steers, but those are the ones you might have to see point of the shoulder, front leg, front rib, some places where it starts even more than that. So those are the ones I want scoring a little bit dead when the gates bang. I'll make sure I have a score chute. Like Preford has those score chutes. Those things are real handy where they don't jump at the gates. They have to watch a steer, and they go off your hand. I want those horses scoring pretty dead. What I mean by that is I want to make sure when the gates bang, they know it's going to be a little while before that start gets there, and then they can go. Now, that's a little bit different than how I would score, say, a World Series horse. That when you go to the World Series barriers, those are the ones that are real short. It's usually with the steer, right behind them. Those type starts right there, I don't want them jumping at the gates, but I don't want them scoring dead where you're late. So when I nod my head, as long as they stay behind my hand, but maybe their feet are moving a little bit, I don't mind that at all, because I want them to know here just right after the gates bang, we're about to go. That way they're right there, just ready to go right as soon as you release. And so those are kind of some of the different places that you'll go through between rodeos to World Series jackpots. Your smarter rodeo horses, another good thing that you can do too. They get to where they score really good at home, but they don't at other places. Take them to different places. Maybe even your World Series horses too. Maybe they get to where they're good in the box at home, but when you take them to another event, they don't do as near as good. Go to different places. Go to your friends' places. Make sure you keep the same type practice to where they make sure that they stay good in the box. Be able to make sure that the World Series roping, maybe you're able to go and score some steers after the roping and make sure you're managing them good in the box. Rodeos, you can score the calves or the steer wrestling steers after in slack at the end of their event to where you can score there as well. So try to just manage it as much in different locations as you can. That way, no matter what, they don't know the difference, and that's how you're going to get more longevity out of your horses scoring. And remember, that's where the start is. So good luck.